This is around 2017 in the spring or the fall. I was 19 at the time and I live in Germany. Me and my friends used to hang out in a friend's basement, smoke the good stuff and play video games or watch movies until late at night. My best friend at the time lived just a couple houses down the street from me, and usually it was just the two of us riding our bikes back home. There were two routes we used to use, one through the city or the other, significantly shorter one through a small forest, completely dark but proper forest road. That route made a 90-degree turn, crossed some trails and a major unlit highway via a bridge. We only took that route when we were equipped with lights and, of course, in a group of at least two people, because there were a lot of boars, wild animals and such, so you don't want to be on your own in case something happens. One night we set out to ride home, both quite stoned and maybe a couple beers in, but not too far off the deep end. As we got close to that 90-degree turn where the road heads up the bridge, my friend who was riding in front suddenly brakes because there was a relatively large tree laying across the road. We both took our bikes and lifted them over the tree and continued on, not thinking anything of it. Maybe 10 to 20 meters later, we suddenly spot a fire on the side, right at the junction where we had to make our turn. It was just the size of a small campfire, but still it felt odd to me. We slowed down a bit, both wondering what I can imagine was the same thing, but as we got closer to the fire, we spotted people. Now, it wouldn't be that strange to see people at night in a forest, but this wasn't that type of town, and these woods weren't those types of woods. Forming a semicircle around the fire, 6 or 7 people were facing us as we rode closer. All were long white robes with masks. Not like what you think, but more like weird wooden ones like you would see at a masquerade. My friend stopped his bike again, and I stopped behind him. I saw the look on his face as he stared at the people around the fire. It's what I think fear must truly look like. I think they were staring back, but hidden behind the masks. I couldn't tell for sure. I tried to get him to move so we could get out of there, but he was frozen until one of the masked people turned their attention away from the fire and started walking over to us. The slow pace I assumed he took made me realize we needed to go, so I shook my friend and yelled for him to go now. Shaken out of it, he rode off for the bridge in the distance, just past them, and I followed quickly, and we didn't stop until we were on a well-lit road again. I only looked back once to see all the figures still around the fire and the one standing in the middle of the road, watching us, motionlessly. We got onto our street, went to our respective homes and put that night as far back in our minds as we could. We never talked about it again, but it did affect us, and it's safe to say we always took the long way home from then on out. My childhood best friend Marie and I were around 11 or 12 years old at the time. Marie's family had their own campsite in a provincial park about 2 hours from our hometown and would spend the entire summer each year living in their camper out there. This particular summer, I was able to go and stay with them for a week, and we were excited to spend our time adventuring around the forest. On the last night that I was there, we decided we wanted to hurry down to the ice cream shop by the lake before it closed. It was early evening at this point, still pretty bright out but beginning to lose light. The path we took was down a short slope right next to the main road, with maybe 10 feet of thick brush and trees in between. On the other side was the forest, with more tall, thick trees and grasses. So, we were walking along, not seeing a single other person on the path in front or behind us, when we hear a sudden rustling and snapping of branches, similar to the sound of maybe a deer moving through the woods. I wouldn't have thought anything of it, but then the sound of running footsteps followed. Marie glances back and suddenly grabs my arm, urging me under her breath not to look back. At the same time, the running stops. I don't know why I didn't ignore her and get a look myself. I guess I could sense the very real fear in her voice and chose to listen. We both start to panic, getting that feeling like when you're running up the stairs after turning the basement light off. We pick up speed as much as we can without breaking into a sprint, knowing the ice cream shop is only about a minute walk away at this point. The path soon splits, and we are in the parking lot. Suddenly, Marie steers me hard to the left, heading towards the lake and the boat rental instead of continuing straight to the ice cream shop, and I go along with it silently, understanding ice cream is no longer an interest right now. Marie is clearly panicking at this point. We are both looking around, but it seems whatever scared her is nowhere in sight. Marie walks up to the boat rental and gets us a kayak, and we climb in and begin to paddle out into the middle of the lake. As we paddle, she tells me that there was a man behind us, and that the man had stopped running at us very abruptly upon making eye contact with her. He had been wearing a long black coat with the hood up, despite it being the middle of July, had a terrible smirk on his face, and she swore that as he stopped running, she saw him put something shiny away into his coat. He appeared to have just emerged out of the bushes after we walked past, given the sounds we heard right before he came running onto the path. We reach the centre of the lake and stop paddling. I pull out my Nokia brick phone that my parents had, thank God, given me just in case. I hand it to Marie and tell her to call her parents to come pick us up. As the phone rings, I see her look out past me to the shore and go pale, lifting a hand to point to what she's seeing. I turn, and there was the man, stalking his way around the path that circled the edge of the lake, staring out at us. We sat in the middle of the lake and watched him do 2 full laps, never looking away from us, before finally disappearing. It took a few tries to get a hold of her family. We were freaking out so bad the whole time, especially as the sun got lower and lower. We did manage to have someone come with the truck, but by the time we reached the shore it was pretty dark outside. I don't know what we would have done if we hadn't been able to call for a ride. Looking back, I don't know why we didn't just go up to the ice cream shop, inform an adult, and ask her parents to come get us there. But it worked out. We got back safe, and we thankfully never saw the man again. I grew up out in the wooded countryside of Illinois, on a short, dead-end street 10 miles or more from the nearest town. There were 7 houses in the area, spread out on 2.5-acre wooded lots or larger each. There were no large wild animals. There aren't bears or similarly large animals in the region, and people didn't meander there or show up lost. Actually, lost folks or large animals wandering around never happened in the 20 years I lived there. So please keep that in mind. When I was a young girl in my early teens, I had a good guy friend a few years older than me, who lived next door named Terry. Terry was allowed to go out with his friends much later than I was, and he would sometimes tromp over to my yard after getting home late and throw rocks from the gravel area outside at my window to chat. My bed was right next to the window. I'd open the window and we'd whisper stories and generally talk for a bit. My other window faced our backyard, and his house was to the side. I could see his house from my window over the shrub trees and walking path to his driveway. I'd often know if he was out. The light was on over the side door entrance if he was, and if he was already home, the light was off. One time during the summer, I heard a car in his driveway dropping him off. I was probably 14 years old, and it was around midnight. I heard Terry get out, and his friends pull away. I gently opened my window, softly called out, as loud as I could without waking my parents, asking Terry to stop by and chat. He didn't respond, as he probably didn't hear me. Then I came up with the not-so-brilliant idea to sneak outside and scare him. So I silently snuck down from the 2nd floor and headed to Terry's house through a well-worn wooded path about 25 feet long. Stepping only on the wooden circles to avoid the gravel from waking up my parents, my eyes got accustomed to the dark. But I didn't see him near his house, and the light was off. On my way back, I thought I saw something move in the woods, but I wasn't sure at that moment. I stared until again I saw something move, but what I saw wasn't an animal, it was human-sized. The figure seemed to be pacing, disappearing and reappearing behind the foliage of the tree line. For some dumb reason, I thought it might have been Terry, that he heard me and was trying to prank me, so I took a few steps closer, only to realize the figure was too large to be him. I ran back to my house and back up the way I came into my window, closing it shut behind me. I ducked down underneath the windowsill and covered my mouth with both hands. Someone was out there. Getting a hold of myself, I was about to crawl back into bed when I heard it, the sound of crunching gravel, getting louder and closer. I mustered up all my courage, peeked out from the bottom of my window to see a glance of the figure from the trees, now moving about under my window on the other side. I wanted to say something, call out to my parents. I wanted to move, but I couldn't. I thought I could wait it out, and it would just go away after a few minutes. The moonlight was coming in through the window, so at least it wasn't dark, and eventually I didn't hear anything enough to check again. As I was about to do it, the moonlight suddenly disappeared, and I knew whatever or whoever this figure was the reason. I looked up from under the window to see the figure looking in, scanning my room, breathing heavily on the glass, and I still couldn't make out a face. There was a hood, bulkiness, but nothing more than that, since where the face would be was swallowed up by darkness. I didn't move. I knew the figure would see me, so I closed my eyes and held my breath when all of a sudden I heard Terry's father yell out, which startled the figure. It clearly disappeared as the moonlight returned to bathe my room. I hopped into bed, hid under the sheets, and cried. The next morning, my parents told me about what Terry's father had seen outside my window and done to scare him off. His father chased after the figure before he disappeared into the tree line behind our houses. The police were called after our dads went to investigate to find what looked like someone had been living in the woods, even finding some items from both of our houses trash and something that neither mine nor Terry's father wanted to talk about. Security was tightening around both our houses and the whole town was on high alert. As things tend to do, this all passed in time, and a few months after that, I talked to Terry to see if he knew what it was our dads found that bothered them. With the most concerned look I had ever seen on his face up to that point, Terry told me that he was told to keep an eye on me because there were items from the trash in a pile that were all mine. Like as if it was a shrine.